because at the end of the day, that's the most uncontrollable way of doing business. Having a relationship with the cattle rancher down the street and the butcher on the other side of town, and raising some chickens, raising some ducks. I could trade with somebody, the guy down the street. That's really what it's all about. But first we got to get out of our shell, get out of our comfort zone, and go shake somebody's hand. That's the number one thing that's going to help us upset this beast system.
We see our world changing so quickly, it's hard to even keep up any longer. It's almost like this forced change is so sloppy that there appears to be some timeline that needs to be adhered to, and break all, whatever all, it just needs to go there. And we see this around the world, how quickly things are changing. And if there's any dissent, it is absolutely squashed. We see a lot of new legislation coming out of the United Nations saying, if you disagree with the Agenda 2030 goals, we are absolutely going after every channel, every media publication that disagrees with anything on that 2030. Used to be just the climate. Now it's everything. If you don't agree with smart appliances, you're targeted. But all this revolves around central bank digital currencies and the issuance and programmable money. See, the reason they want to they didn't want to stop selling you gas stoves in America because it was bad for the environment. They wanted to stop you because they can't turn that off. It is natural gas and you cook your food. It's not electricity driven. You didn't comply, we turn it off, you don't eat kind of compliance. It was like, we can't control the cooking of your food. So put it in this context as we have the conversation today. The world we're going into is, the rabbit hole's deep, it's dark, but down there is light. We have to find a way to navigate through this. And everywhere you look, you're starting to hear about CBDCs, tokenization of assets, digitization of forests using LiDAR to get carbon sequestration credits back into the countryside to help them lift their economies, and all these like kind of, words that, that are good for the farm gate and all these types of things. They check all the boxes for NGOs, etc. It's far more nefarious than that. So again, John Bush with me from Live Free Academy. We've done a couple interviews over the years. Now he's got a symposium coming up here on August 12th through the 14th, and it's a CBDC opt-out challenge. Because in realistic fashion, we're going to have to discuss this. Like, how are we going to move away from this world that we don't want to participate in? And you can already see that this CBDC goes live in Europe at the end of this year. So I think it's November. And where does it take us from that point? Where if you say something wrong, they can reduce your money. If the governments are flailing, they can take your money and turn it into negative interest. So if you don't spend it, it turns into either zero or you lose value every year. So they can force spending to increase economic activity. At the same time, the compliance that will come in here is just going to be, iron fisted. If you say even one thing wrong, you take it to the social credit score of China, it's going to be times 10 of that once they get it on the global level. So here to discuss, John, thanks for letting me ramble there on the intro. And, you can just take it any direction you want. And everybody, please take a look, join this symposium, because we need to talk about this together and find the solutions. And then we can share with others once we get the information. And then if enough people say no, like it was at the end of COVID, we all said, no more mask, bro. And it suddenly stopped on a dime because nobody else would comply with it. And we need to do the same thing with the CBDCs. So floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. Let's roll. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate your work. What I try to focus on is solutions. So a lot of folks are living in fear, rightfully so. This predator class is advancing their agenda at breakneck speed. There seems to be a steady cadence. Then there's some kind of crisis, sometimes real, mostly manufactured, and that accelerates the agenda. And so what I want to encourage people to do is to step out of a reactionary paradigm where our entire lives and the things we focus on and the actions we take, a lot of folks were like reacting to the enemy's program. We need to take control of our lives, come up with our own plans, our own goals. And so the strategy that we like to promote at Live Free Academy, it's called Exit and Build. Exit the beast system and build a new system.
The obvious question, are you on shrooms? Illuminated shrooms combining 6 powerful mycelium and a fulvic mineral delivery system selected for their synergistic restorative and protective actions, potent organic extracts of cordyceps for stamina, lion mane for cognition, reishi for longevity, chaga for detoxification, agaricus for resistance, nutrient-rich turkey tail, a new standard and excellent illuminated shrooms from Alpha Vedic. And please remember, ladies and gentlemen, every purchase you make helps keep this podcast on air, bringing information just like this, because we're at this critical juncture right now in our civilization, our society. We need to share information more than ever. We need more solutions than ever. And sponsors like Alphabetic keeping us on air just like this, your support to them helps support us, because we need to go through this together. And the more discussion, the more solutions, the easier it's going to be. So please remember, that link's in the description box below. And are you shrooming?
I've been studying the Predator class, the New World Order, whatever you want to call them, for a good 22 years now. And, you know, it used to be, we got to wake people up so we can prevent the New World Order from coming. And then the technology advanced at a rapid rate. And then, of course, COVID really accelerated things. But now it's like, it's breathing down our necks. And so we need to take action. And the CBDCs, out of all viewing all these different machinations and mechanisms and tactics and strategies that these technocrats are trying to employ, the CBDCs are what have me most worried. So we put together the CBDC opt-out challenge. It's a 3-day event where I'll break down my 4C strategy for opting out of CBDCs, building alternative communities, counter economies, parallel economies, using alternative currencies. I'm a big fan of cryptocurrency, especially Monero. It's a private cryptocurrency. A lot of people have reservations about crypto still. I want to help overcome those objections, because it's my firm belief that private cryptocurrencies, those are where you can't tell who sent what to whom or how much crypto you're holding. That's the best tool we have to do business with one another online. Now, it doesn't stop there. Crypto by no means is a panacea. It's not going to save the day. We need to have a multi-pronged approach. Big fan of precious metals. Was just in Tennessee at a Mennonite farmers market with my good friend Amani from Haven Village, and we bought $52 worth of farm fresh produce. And when we got to the register, I had a pocket full of silver coins, silver ounce, Walking Liberty silver ounce worth about $40 at the time, still today, I believe, and some $50, Kennedy $50, silver that's 1964 and earlier, dimes, quarters, $50. They were 90% silver, and each one of those was worth like $14. So $52 bill, paid $40 silver ounce, and then $1.50, and talked to the guys about it there at the register, analog register.
That was equal share. They didn't give you a premium for giving them silver, so it was still on par with what the dollar equivalent was.
Yeah, it was the exact amount. And you know, the Walking Liberty silver ounce is arguably worth more than an ounce of silver because it's U.S. mint. It was brand new, but I was just trying to. I was trying to educate my audience and show folks how easy this is. You just have to have the courage to strike up a conversation at the farmers market, whether it's Mennonites or not. Perhaps Mennonites who opposed technology in the first place are low-hanging fruit. They were happy to have it. They were all excited. Some of the younger folks came out and started holding it. And where'd you get it? And what's the value? How do you know what it's worth? We use these little coin calculators. There's apps. You just search silver coin calculator. But no, I just wanted to make the exchange and start building that relationship. And then my friend River and Amani, they have a community there, Haven Village in Tennessee. And the folks that live there, 2 of them that live there, they're into silver too. So now they're going to start buying veggies. But I was trying to make the point, like a lot of folks are hesitant about crypto. That's okay. Although you should really give it a shot, especially for online commerce. But we can use silver. We can do barter. We can build relationships. There is a path. And this system is only accelerating, especially in the US. I'd love to talk about stable coins with you. But it's really critical that people take action, because if you do not prepare, if you do not have a means of buying goods and services, and ideally offering goods and services yourself in exchange for alternative currencies, if you don't have money flowing, current flowing, currency, current energy, if you don't have that current flowing with freedom people, freedom businesses, local farmers market, local food producer. When the CBDC system comes into play, it's not the CBDCs that are the big worry per se, because most of us, myself included, we're already using mostly digital money. Wire transfer, ACH, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, swiping a card. It's all digital. It's all centralized. It's all surveillable when we do that. It's all censorable. I've had a bank account shut down. Love to tell you more about that. And I've had two PayPal accounts for two companies, Cash App, Square, Stripe, all shut down for selling natural health products that weren't illegal. The big concern when the CBDCs come out, as you've already alluded to, is the programmability. So it's not the technology necessarily, because it's not that different than what we already have, although it'll be more interoperable on a global scale, as you know. It's the programmability. It's what they aim to do with CBDCs. And what they aim to do is socially engineer the public into accepting their full technocratic program. And that's not a life that I want to live. So we're going to break down in this challenge. I hope folks will join us, will sign up, how exactly to escape this beast system.
Yeah, and I would say a couple things with that too is they're also tagging this in with insurance companies. So the CBDCs will track and trace everything that's bought coming across in your life. So insurance companies are worried about health risks on this. And one of the things with Roberts Kennedy's wearables thing was it was come to find out that the wearables would be in conjunction that information that insurance companies would have a backdoor into that. So think about the purchases that they know what you have. So if you buy too much alcohol or too many potato chips, or you buy things that, you buy too many health foods, you buy whatever it is, you're going to be put into a category based on your lifestyle for insurance companies. And the risk assessment, like if you live in a fire zone, you're not going to get insured. Or if it is, it's going to be incredible high risk. The same thing could be said for what you're looking at with your body, what you're putting into your body. How I run my body is no business from anybody else. If I go out and work in the middle of the day and I get super hot to the point of not heat exhaustion, but to the point where I need to go, it's so hot, I got to go back in, but my heat spiked. And they're like, well, you're so dangerous working out in the day. That's a risk. You could have had a heart attack out there or something. But nobody would know that for me just living on my land, working out here. But now if they're going to try to require wearables, but I know there'll be a pushback against that. So the next step, if they can't get the wearables implemented, they'll be given for free. You see the push for wearables is not because they want to keep you healthy and make you healthy again. It's for insurance companies to categorize you and put your health significance in that as a risk or non-risk. Because insurance companies have gone with this long game of the regular, investments of bonds and this sort of thing. It's totally underwater. So now for them to stay alive, they're scraping everybody by increasing our premiums, and it will increase for 5% per year from now on, as far as we know. And at the same time, they're trying to not pull out of places that could have payouts because of their bad investments over long term. And the world's shifting so much. Like, why would you put something in a bond that's paying what, 5% per year, 2% per year, whatever it is and instead of going into some of the cryptocurrency things here that are now pulling up at 20, 30% per year. It's ridiculous on how people are dumping the old investments, moving into the new ones. But the thing is, they're going to have to get you into this, and you're going to have to be willingly complying to it. So in this conversion, it's going to start around 2027. They're going to ask you to turn in your physical paper US dollars to convert over to the US dollar stable coin, or there's going to be a name for it, the same name. It'll be a US dollar something. They're not going to change the name because that'll freak everybody out. They're probably going to give you an overage on it. They're probably going to say it's not even 1-to-1. It's 1.5 to 1 or 2 to 1. Give us your paper. We'll give you 2 digital dollars. They're going to want you to voluntarily give it away. And this is how this is how the whole system starts. But please, just even that as a cornerstone to look at is what you buy from now on will be given to other companies to put you and categorize you. And then, moving forward from there, you'll either be able to get services or you'll be denied services based on the purchases that they can prove you did. It's almost like Minority Report then at that point for your diet. That's only one aspect of it.
But definitely the food piece is huge. It makes perfect sense. Why not track it? Why not tie it in your health habits? It wouldn't be very difficult at all if you are exceeding your caloric intake or your cholesterol rating reaches something, and then you go to buy the potato chips, all of a sudden they cost 20% more, all programmed, all executed with artificial intelligence. As I was examining this, I was reminded of an old business adage, and that is, you can't manage what you don't measure. And that's the exact same thing that these technocrat control freaks are aiming to do with every element of biodiversity. They want to manage it, they want to control it. And in order to do so effectively, they need to know as much information about all of it as possible. But the other piece is corporate profit. And so what's essentially happened is the debt-based monetary system has been over leveraged and exploited to the point where it's challenging to turn a profit off of it. So now they're going to tokenize, essentially take every bit of biodiversity and tie it in with some trackable cryptocurrency token on a centralized blockchain. And then they're going to securitize it all. We were talking about this before the show. I know you covered in your stuff as well. And so now they have entirely new markets and new outcomes. They can put puts and shorts and longs and all sorts of stuff. They're going to do that same thing with people's health. We're going to bet that the insurance premiums are going to remain here, or that this particular group of people that we've identified with these characteristics and we have this archetype for them, their outcomes are going to go down. These other people's outcomes are going to go up. Let's make bets on it. That'll all be tied in with the CBDC system, their backdoor casino aspect of it. So it's like, yeah, we share this stuff not to alarm, to inform, but also I hope it lights a fire under people's behinds, because we don't have to have a reality where we're just like, well, that sounds really crappy, and that's unfortunate that that's going to happen to me, especially my kids and my grandkids. No. They don't have all the power. They only have that power which we give to them. So what we're encouraging people to do is to take their power back, their individual sovereignty, and to recognize that we all have this beautiful, divine, creative spark within us. And we need to get back to building, creating, connecting with one another, trading outside their system, becoming entrepreneurial, keeping the flow of current going. That's one of the sessions. It's actually one of my favorite sessions in the challenge. It's called Keep the Current Flowing. And the way that I examine this is like, money is like a current currency, right? Current currency. It's like an energy. So if we're going to do business together, I'm flowing value your way and you're flowing money back my way in the form of you're flowing value back my way in the form of money. That could be barter. It could be trade. It could be you're great at giving massages and I got this chicken I just slaughtered. We'll do a little swap or whatever. And so you got to keep the current flowing, because what they aim to do with the CBDCs is stop the current between free people. So we keep the current flowing over, under, around with alternative currencies. But you got to learn this stuff now. Don't wait till it's too late, because the more that they tighten their grip through CBDCs and financial controls, the harder it's going to get to access this technology, to go out and meet the right people. And so I just really want to encourage folks to lay the groundwork now while we still have relative freedom, because you've studied the dates. 2030 is their huge dream date. They want to have all the pieces in place. Everything's happening faster and faster. They never let a good crisis go to waste. So, I think it's still frog in the boiling pot, and they still got to run their pilots, and then understand too, all of these systems are going to be interconnected to form a global control grid. But it's just one crisis away from them ramping up, accelerating, or forcing an existing system like stable coins here in the US onto everybody. So we need to be prepared.
And you'd mentioned Monero as a anonymity token. Well, there's others out there too. You got Pirate Chain and Zcash, one of the originals. So a good thing is to familiarize yourself with those. Verge as well. That's an old school one, but they've kind of changed tacks a little bit. And notice what the ISO 20022 tokens are for these payment rails that are going to be in here. You got things like Algorand and XRP and Stellar Lumens, that's another one. You know, so all these are going to be used for different levels of payment. Like Stellar XLM is going to be used for like buying a stick of gum or a pack of gum. Something else is going to be a little bit higher up the value chain. And then we have this thing that's going to fund all the banks for instant demand liquidity, which is XRP on the on-demand liquidity side of things for their distributed ledger settlements. And that goes all the way global. So as we roll through everything here, it's good to familiarize yourself with the different tokens that will be used during this time. So once you see them implemented, you could go, oh, that's just another verification. I see that one. They were talking about that one. So once you see all this happening, then this stablecoin issuance, the whole thing about the stablecoins too, is that US dollar, like you said, is kind of, it's at this juncture point. I'm not going to say it's dead. It's not going to die in a day. It's at this point of inflection right now. They need to get more people to use it. And the easiest way I was explained to me was if they can get on a digital system dollars, then somebody, a taxi driver or an Uber driver in Brazil could accept USDT as their payment or USDC, whatever it is, instead of taking local currency. And that way the usage of dollars could spread across the planet completely, because that option for everybody to use tethers or Circle, USDC stable coins issued at the level. And then also, hell, maybe there's a huge push for corporations to issue their own too. I know Walmart was going to do it. So I know there's Walmarts in every single country around the planet. So perhaps they would want to take Walmart issued coins because they know they're going to go to Walmart to shop. So a lot of these are going to be something like this. And then the actual use of native currencies is going to decline in tandem with the rollout of the corporate tokens, as well as the the stable coins that are going around based on a US dollar. So how do you give value to that? That's another point. Is we could say we're going to make all these USDT and we're going to print all this digitally. Well, people just look at it and say, well, it's going to be worthless, but it's not, because you touched on it there, the digitization of everything. And it goes beyond the biodiversity as well. It goes to every mineral deposit in the ground assigned a value. It goes to every natural gas well, every oil well in the ground assigned a value. Like the water, that's a terrifying thing they want to try to control. The forest, that's dangerous too. But even beneath our feet, they're going to assign a value to every single square inch of this earth, above it, on it, and below it. And once all that is wrapped into a package, then they can say we have this much value that we can issue against. So the banks that hold your mortgage are also going to bail that in and go, your house is worth this much. Now our bank can issue this much stablecoin because we have this many assets under management. So this is the way it starts, and it rolls this direction. And the whole thing is getting more adoption of using US dollars outside the United States. So it is going everywhere.
Yeah, and you got to hand it to Donald Trump. It's pretty cunning. I always look at the predator class and these oligarchs and kind of awe, like, wow. Of course, they make a lot of mistakes, and sometimes we can see right through their agenda. But other times you're like, man, I got to hand it to him. This is pretty cunning stuff here. And I think that's what's happened with Trump. You know, he said he wants to make the dollar strong, and everybody knows that the dollar is overextended. But what they managed to do with these stable coins, so the new legislation that passed, called the Genius Act, regulates stable coins. Say what you will about he filed for bankruptcy. Say what you will about he's just building on the back of his father. First of all, he's taken things to a whole nother level from what his father did. And second of all, a lot of entrepreneurs file for bankruptcy. You win some, you lose some. It doesn't mean that he hasn't created $1 billion real estate empire. But one thing that Trump's good at is execution, is the art of the deal. Great book, by the way. Everyone should give it a read, especially if you're in business. And he's surrounded himself with effective allocators of capital. A lot of big tech oligarchs as well. This essentially is a group of people that can get stuff done, because the cunning thing that they did was leverage existing technology in the form of stable coins, technology that's already in existence and already fully operational on a global scale. Not only that, but he also killed two birds with one stone, in that now he found a mechanism for propping up US debt, because each one of these stable coins, Tether, USDT, and USDC being the two most predominant, they're both now required to have a 1-to-1 reserve ratio with the most common quote unquote asset, the US Treasury note. And so now, as more people begin to use stable coins in the US and abroad, especially Latin America, there's a huge market for Tether. There's all of a sudden going to be much more demand for buying these treasury notes, which is simply propping up the United States government Fugazi machine that was kind of on its last leg. Like you said, the dollar wasn't going to collapse today or tomorrow by any means, but we all saw where things were going. Now there's this huge new demand for treasuries propping up the dollar. And not only that, the revolving door between the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Cantor Fitzgerald, they're holding on and stewarding half of Tether. So it's continuing the foreign wars of aggression. It's continuing the financing of these phony entitlement programs and just Fugazi United States government. I got to hand it to Trump for pulling it off. And of course, one big worry now, and this is what Aaron Day, great researcher, he'll be joining us for the challenge. Aaron Day, I'd say he's probably the world's leading researcher on CBDCs, especially this whole stablecoin sneak attack. He saw it well before I did. I learned like, oh, wow, this is what's going to happen here in the US. You're right. Whilst Trump's saying, we're going to ban CBDCs. I'm signing this executive order. Ah, I see what you guys are doing here. That's just a smoke and mirror. You're actually rolling it in at breakneck speed through existing systems. But what Aaron Day suspects is that perhaps JP Morgan or a larger banking institution will come in and acquire Tether. If not, they're creating their own tokens. And like you correctly pointed out, all of these tokens, even though they'll be different, have different flavor, maybe even different benefits and different technologies tied to them, they're all going to be interoperable. Massachusetts Institute of Technology is actually one of the institutions, one of the organizations that's helping the different foreign governments and different institutions to integrate it to make sure they have common protocols. So it's all coming and it's happening faster than we thought. And it's time to prepare.
Yeah, another thing that's hitting the airwaves too is getting loans against your crypto. Like there's a huge push right now. Now it's in its infancy where it's pure capital. So it's like if I walk into any place with a kilogram bar of gold, they're going to give me a loan against that. I don't care if I've been bankrupt 6 times, lost my house, and I'm living on the street. If I have a bar of gold, that's good enough for capital to get at least a percentage of that for a loan that they will take as pure capital. The same thing with Bitcoin and Ethereum. You can go to certain places right now that are online and you can pledge your Bitcoin and they will give you, up to 50% of that loan to value ratio. So if you, easy math, if a Bitcoin's 120,000, they'll give you 60,000 on 50% of the value of that Bitcoin. Now you need to pay back the interest plus the loan itself. But if Bitcoin were to go up to say 200,000 or 300,000 next year, you would pay off the old loan and get the new money to create a new loan off of that at a higher value for Bitcoin. That's great because I believe a lot of these people are true and they have good intention that are trying to roll this out. But again, above them resides the predator class and they want your Bitcoin. There's going to be a liquidity shortage of Bitcoin coming up shortly. Not exactly defined as which month and which day, but there's so many corporations that are buying it. And once it comes off an exchange somewhere over the counter, it goes right into their treasuries, never to move again. Now that's great if only 2 or 3 companies were doing it, but there's over 1,000 companies since the last 2 months that are starting to buy it. Once you start to look and see, all right, well, this will eventually go down. When I first started looking at the liquidity issues, it was around 2.9 million liquid Bitcoin are out on all the exchanges around the world and everything. Today, we're right at 2 million. So within 3 months, a full million has disappeared of liquidity off of there. That's only 3 months. 3 months. And now it's just the corporations are going into FOMO, the fear of missing out, because they didn't get in at Bitcoin at an earlier price. And look at Michael Saylor and look at the valuations and the Bitcoin treasuries and all these things. Look what Strike's doing. It's getting the corporations like, oh, we need to get this, but we need to buy Bitcoin now. So there's 58,000 companies in the world. There's 12,000 family offices that are high net worth individuals. Just that alone puts it at right around 70,000. Then we got, several hundred governments around the world. So put this in perspective for a second. If all of them go for Bitcoin at the same time, or even a portion of it, there's not going to be enough. I was doing on 60,000, just even math. And even at the amount of available Bitcoin at that time at 3 million, it was just fractions of a Bitcoin of everybody, all corporations and family offices wanted to purchase. But we're quickly coming to this point where they're going to need to run the price up to liquidate it and get it out of your hands. And at the same time, they're going to be pushing these Bitcoin and crypto loans on people that it sounds so safe and so like, wow, I can live off of this crypto that I didn't sell since 2017 or 2013 or whatever. I can live on that now. I'll just pledge it over there and I'll just keep re-rolling the loan. But yeah, you know, we saw The Great Taking in that book by David Rogers Webb and the subsequent videos that it just, you won't sleep for a week after watching that. Somewhere in there, as you say rightly, John, there is a predator class that will use these already pre-existing laws to swoop your Bitcoin out of there, because by the time it goes from your wallet up to these companies that will pledge that for collateral to give you the loans, it needs to move through a traditional bank. And that's where we get this possible swoop neck out of there. I'm not even going to call it a bottleneck. It's a swooping neck, because well, all these pre-existing laws that are there, because there's Bailey, you mentioned JP Morgan, and that was what brought me to that. Like all this collateral that could be used to bail out a bank instead, bail in the banks for your collateral. So these whole Bitcoin loan programs, I'm very much, as soon as the Great Taking is over, it would be a good time to jump in and then possibly do that if you survived through it. They're going to want to get everyone, because this really is going to multi-million dollars per token. And the companies that have it or governments that have it can then issue against it. And this is another whole layer that we're not even talking about on the actual biodiversity or mineral rights. We're talking on a whole crypto level that they can loan off against too. So, you know, you're playing levels deep here on liquidity, on how they're going to roll out value for these stable coins.
For sure. And it's really important for folks that do hold Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency for that matter to self-custody your cryptocurrency. Without a doubt. The demand is there now. The liquidity, the supply is shrinking by design and by demand. And it's not just going to be retail competing for it. It's now corporations. It's now family houses. And it's going to be banks, governments, and even central banks. And I believe they're going to settle their own transactions, large transactions amongst the big banks and the central banks with Bitcoin, or at least promises of Bitcoin, just as they did originally with gold. But we all saw where that went. Now, it's this weird inversion, just like you said. We have this positive thing, and I believe Bitcoin to be positive. Bitcoin has shaped up to be a digital gold store of value as such. And it's kind of now being integrated with the legacy financial institution. Now, I've been in the Bitcoin space since 2012, 2013. And back then, we were like, Bitcoin's going to end the Fed. Bitcoin is going to help us end these wars. Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash, a medium of exchange, that's going to be the first use case. And then when it's effective and predominant as a medium of exchange, according to Austrian theory of economics, that's when it becomes more of a store of value. You don't start with store of value, then go to medium of exchange. You have something useful, tradable, that's liquid, then it becomes a store of value. That's how it's happened throughout history. That was since Bitcoin's going to end the Fed. It's the peer-to-peer electronic cash to compete with the dollar. That's not how things turned out. And there was some co-opting. And that being said, I do still find immense value in Bitcoin, as does the market. It's relatively unconfiscatable if you self-custody it. And so there's positive things, but then that gets inverted. There's this guy that writes a series of books called The Upside Down. It's like upside down healthcare, upside down money. It's all inverted and corrupted. So there is a use case for cryptocurrency to supply it as capital and liquidity, and then to borrow against it. But what I've been doing and what we teach with Live Free Academy is to use decentralized finance. I got CeFi, let a bank custody your Bitcoin, then borrow against it. Then you got DeFi, decentralized finance. And so just as a lot of this cryptocurrency is programmable and there's smart contracts going to be used by the predator class to control people, there's also genuinely decentralized freedom programs that will allow you to take cryptocurrency, supply it as collateral, borrow against it. And this isn't done by giving custody to a centralized institution like a bank that can be swiped out from underneath you. Once you hand it over, you know, folks aren't going to read the
You're
fine
not
print.
coming back. That's the whole danger I'm trying to say is once you pledge that, your chances of getting it back intact are what percentage do you think, John?
Pretty low. Yeah, but
Pretty
what
low.
I'm talking about is you're putting it into a smart contract that's open source and visible and viewable. And this is a coded agreement amongst those that are supplying the liquidity in the form of crypto and amongst those that, and then the program lends it back to you. It's not centralized. It can't be. Now, because the code is open source, it makes it extremely anti-fragile in that if there is some sort of exploit or vulnerability, the entire space and all the other coders and developers and people that have billions of dollars in liquidity have an interest in finding that and patching it. The platform that I use, I've done this before. I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years. I did it to pay for my house to get painted. It was about $5,000. It was the first use I used decentralized finance. I did it for a down payment on our solar system. Did it for a down payment on a car. I did it to put a deposit to expand our offices a few years ago. I did it when there was a little bit of cash flow crunch in my company. And then you pay it back and you get access to your crypto back. And so it's a positive thing, but the warning is, and I'm not saying that that's foolproof either. Sometimes these smart contracts end up having an exploit. Sometimes these stable coins end up losing their peg. They're no longer worth $1. It's happened with decentralized stable coins in the past. But there's certain principles where you can engage this game of cryptocurrency, alternative financial systems. But you need to follow these principles. And the number one principle is self-custody your crypto, not your keys, not your coins. You never hand over cryptocurrency to a third party because once you send it to them, even if they're custodying, even if you got some kind of bank contract, it's only a matter of time, just like they did with gold in the past under FDR, they could take it. So you don't hand over your crypto because if they have the private keys, then they have control. And the whole beauty of crypto is you having control. If you are going to engage in some sort of financial contract, like a decentralized finance smart contract, make sure it's open source. And there's been a ton of eyes that are constantly watching this contract to ensure that what this platform says they're going to do, they are in fact doing. And then, of course, never put more in than you're willing to lose, because this is not, it's not the same. Well, it's all just trading and valuing risk, of course, because having a traditional loan with the bank isn't as safe as we may think it is. Borrowing money from a friend isn't as safe as we may think it is. Same thing with using decentralized finance. So don't ever over leverage yourself, and always be mindful of the liquidity ratio, the collateralization ratio. Just like you said, some of these platforms have a 40%, 75% collateralization ratio. But I just want to throw that out there because yes, people are going to be invited and lured in, and then they're essentially handing over their gold to the banks, which are only going to over issue the currency on top of it. And eventually, because it's going to be in such high demand and governments are going to be fighting over it, just as they fought over gold for centuries, they're probably going to take your Bitcoin. So don't hand it over to anybody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And those bounties, you
Covet
know,
it.
what John was talking about here is those people that are in an open source program, platform, whatever you want like to term that as. There's bounties out there where, you know, there's up to $8,000 to $10,000 if you're finding a little piece of code that's not correct, and they're paying that out all the time because they want that security in there. So if you have develop, if you go to GitHub, you know, you can find a lot of this stuff. But if you got 10,000 coders out there looking to all, you know, get some reward for finding a piece of broken code or an exploit wherever, I mean, it self heals itself within, you know, a day or so. But that, you're right, that one vulnerability for those few seconds that it's not patched up is, you know, the thing. And there, again, familiarizing yourself with anonymity tokens, or at the same time, what are the decentralized platforms that you can use, like Uniswap and Aave?
Well, I use
Yeah, Compound, that's
Compound
the
as
one I was
far as the
thinking of.
decentralized
Yeah.
finance goes, and I haven't had any problems whatsoever. The interest rates are far lower than you
Oh,
would
wait.
get from a bank. Here's another thing too. This is what we teach in the CBDC opt-out challenge, because the technology is great, and And yeah, there's this anti-fragility when you have those bounties. So thank you for pointing that out, because it's like a self-correcting, autonomous organization, which is really pretty cool, and exists in a decentralized way on the internet, making it, and it's global, making it nearly impossible to shut down. Same kind of thing: global currency, global technology, centralized, corrupt, predator class, private and secret, and then global technology, global trade, currencies being used globally, open source, freedom-based, decentralized, uncontrollable. It's like an inversion of one another. And so a lot of people are dismissing cryptocurrency altogether because they think it's digital currency and it's bad, and it's the beast system or whatever. But you're doing yourself a great disservice if you just dismiss currency, cryptocurrency, especially Monero. That's my favorite private cryptocurrency. It's the #1 private cryptocurrency. Zcash is great too. And some would say Zcash has better technology, but Monero is more widely used. There's greater liquidity. There's more places you could spend your Monero to buy food, for example. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because as I shared earlier, cryptocurrency, especially Monero, it's the #1 tool we'll have to continue doing business with one another online. But let's not forget, let's not go back to our roots. Human connection, trust, shaking somebody's hand. You got a pickup truck and they need help moving, or there's a problem on the ranch or the farm, or your neighbor needs some support, go and help them, because providing value in that way is a currency in itself. And I'm a firm believer in the reciprocal nature of human relationships. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. Or better yet, I'm just somebody that's going to show up and help people because that's in my nature. Whether it comes back to me or not, that's the type of person that I am. And when people see that, they're like, this guy's always showed up for us. When I'm in need, they're going to show up for me just naturally. That's how things work. And so, especially folks that are old school, that's how business was done for so long. And we don't have to abandon that, because at the end of the day, that's the most uncontrollable way of doing business. Having a relationship with the cattle rancher down the street and the butcher on the other side of town, and raising some chickens, raising some ducks. We've been popping out ducks like crazy. I just had my son go collect all the eggs from the brooding ducks and hens, because I want to make sure we can manage the new 14 that we just added to the flock before we let them multiply even more. But those eggs, big duck eggs, those drive a pretty high premium, and they're damn good too. They're a little mucusy, but that could be a currency. Or we go ahead and slaughter and butcher one of the ducks, and now I got probably about $20-30 worth of value I could trade with somebody, the guy down the street. That's really what it's all about. But first, we got to get out of our shell, get out of our comfort zone, and go shake somebody's hand. That's the #1 thing that's going to help us upset this beast system.
But helping people really goes a long way. And when things start to break down, more of these centralized systems start to fray at the edges a little more, they're going to remember who they can trust and who they can't. Because at that point, when resources get a little more, let's say, valuable and, a little more heavy on the trade ability of it, they're not going to just welcome anybody in, or they're going to know who didn't help, who the scoundrels are. Like, a community knows all this already. So for those of you living in cities, you're not just going to rock up to an Amish farm when, the supermarkets are making you go through these hoops and hurdles with the CBDC for your swipe codes to be able to buy. Well, I'm just going to the Amish. They take silver. There's going to be a line way in front of you of people that they already know that live around here that they're going to want to trade with and sell with first before they'll be like, who's you? You never saw you before. First time down here? What?
Yeah.
Hey, what are you doing? They'll bring you in get those relationships set up early, especially those who provide you with the foods. You know where your butchers are, know where your ranchers are, so you can get a whole animal. So it's good you brought that up, because you're going to need to meld between these two worlds. Now, I'm just unsure. Once this transition, we're in the transition point at the very cusp of it. Once it really melds in there and we get to the full transition, like, where does it take us on the backside of that, and operability in terms of people who opted out, or this next generation? Like, my grandparents didn't want to use credit cards or debit cards because that was way old school for them. But we were brought up just gradually at the cusp of when all that was becoming real easy for everybody to get. Now today, you don't even think about it. You can't operate it without having it. I mean, it's just so common that you couldn't even envision a world where you didn't have a credit card or a debit card like that. What? So this same kind of world we're going to move into, what's going to be next, that they, you know, in 20 years from now, they're like, I can't even believe you could operate in a world without that type of financial instrument or access.
Well, eventually it'll be, I can't believe you're operating without your Neuralink and you're not tapped fully into the system,
Oh, no,
unfortunately. That's why I'm a firm believer in the fracturing, that there's a fracturing taking place. So I don't believe that we wholesale will upset the beast agenda. I believe that it's inevitable that this great reset will come to fruition. The only question is, do we get engulfed in it, or do we create a parallel society? And that's what my life work is. My divine purpose, my definite purpose, as Napoleon Hill would say, is to create an environment where our freedom community can experience self-governance and political autonomy. We're left to our own devices and we're not constantly looking over our shoulders. That's going to be intergenerational work. But, you know, the predator class, they got intergenerational schemes that they're quite successful at implementing. Meanwhile, we're focused on the next election. How are we going to pay our next month's rent? So I want to just encourage people to, obviously, we all act out of self-interest, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let's also think about the future generations. How is what we're doing today, or more appropriately, what we're not doing today, going to affect our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and beyond? Because just like you said, you think in terms of generations and these shifts, we may not be so cognizant of them now because it's a gradualism, frog in the boiling pot, although it's accelerating. But imagine 2 or 3 generations from now, if we don't break away outside of the smart city, form our own communities, then children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they're going to be born in an environment where freedom isn't taught to them anymore, much like in China. They're like, the Tiananmen Square has been erased from the history books. It's been memory hold in China. And so I just really want to encourage people, like, to shift your perspective on how can I survive today to how can I create a thriving community, not just a parallel economy where we trade amongst ourselves outside of the system in parallel to the legacy financial system, but a parallel society where we raise entire generations, communities, families congregating together with one another. We go back to the old traditional ways. Now, we borrow from new technologies that are beneficial, but not in the inverted, corrupt, centralized panopticon way, in a decentralized way. We leverage the technology so we can make our life more efficient, so we can protect our privacy, so we can communicate and trade value with the other communities that we're part of an alliance with, a confederation of freedom communities. But we're like taking the traditional way of life, where the neighbor's like, hey, you mind picking up the fat for me? And you're like, no problem, I'm going that way anyway. And then they hook you up. Where, hey, I'm going to be out of town visiting family a couple cities away. You think you could watch after the ranch for me? And we get each other's back. That's what it's all about. And here's the thing too. This is like a reaction. We're trying to protect ourselves from what's to come, but this is how we ought to be living anyway. This is in our nature, to connect with the land, to connect with our neighbors. And so that's the underlying foundation of everything we're teaching. Yeah, I'll teach you how to set up a crypto wallet and do it privately and do it with self-custody. I'll teach you where to acquire tradable silver at a low cost, and then what conversations to have and how to bring it up to the guy at the cash register at your local tackle shop or whatever, the farmer's market. But ultimately what we teach and what we're really going to drive home in this challenge is the number one thing that we need to do is take responsibility for our freedom and learn to leave a lasting legacy of liberty for the generations to come. That, if you know what you know, if you're subscribed to this channel, if you're aware of everything David's teaching and what we've been sharing today, maybe some of it's new to you, but maybe you're like, yeah, this is a big problem. I've been studying this. This is a problem. If you know what you know, then I would argue that you have a duty to take action, to participate in creating this alternative system so that the future generations can get a taste of what real freedom is all about. That's our mission. And I'm always honored to come on your program and share a little bit of my world with you.
Yeah, that is great. And please remember, that's the CBDC opt-out challenge, August 12th to the 14th, every morning at 10 a.m. And then you're going to have a final day going on there. John Bush Live Free Academy. I'm going to include that link below in the description box, so you can click on that and see if you find something that piques your interest that you might want to join. The information is going to go far beyond what we spoke about today. So if you found even something or a couple nuggets in here that you're like, oh, those guys, I think I know a lot, but I didn't hear about that. We're just scraping the surface here. So it's going to go deeper on that too. So, you're talking to people that are so many levels above where we sit, and myself, and what I can find just on the, around the web, looking at Bank for International settlements reports and all these kind of World Bank reports. They put it all out there. So if you're really looking, you can find it, but not a lot of people look. So this is going to go in depth, really help you get some, planning of where you possibly could go to try to move through this. In the beginning, we're going to be able to swiftly move through it'll be like jumping on rocks through the stream, but eventually you might come to a waterfall and you're going to think, well, how am I going to traverse that? That's what this is all about. We're going to skip on some rocks for a minute, but then we're going to come to a bigger blockage. But then how do you overcome that? Go up it, around it with others. So appreciate you watching. Hope you got something out of our conversation, and I'll see you next time. John, any last words there before we wrap it up?
No, thanks for having me. Yeah, I hope folks join me with the challenge. We'll get down and dirty with the problem, and we'll provide a whole lot of solutions. And just want to thank you again. It's always an honor to join you, and I really appreciate what you're doing here on the program.
Likewise. See if mine's thinking the same thing. We'll see you. Bye for now.